Hey, this is Dennis, and welcome to another episode of the Grounded Reason podcast, where every Monday, Joel and I talk about cord cutting, new consumer technologies, and other issues and topics concerning the internet at large. Today, we're going to be talking about the FCC's plan to kill net neutrality, and we're also going to talk about the letter that Congress wrote to try to fix the privacy mess that they in turn created. So...
I mean, you can't, it's very Keystone Cops, right? Like, you can't make this stuff up.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous. Like, did you see this letter?
No, I haven't
I'll have to. I'll read it. It's something. But before we get into all that, I wanted to just point everyone out there to a great piece that showed up in the Washington Post.
Oh, yeah, this was good.
Oh, yeah. It's by Elizabeth Leamy, and it's called How to Cut the Cable TV Cord in 8 Easy Steps. Now, Elizabeth, the author, she was like a consumer correspondent for Good Morning America, ABC News. And she put together like this high level overview on what the average person can do to cut the cord. But not only that, the piece cited Grounded Reason podcasts and the blog multiple times.
Yeah, which, I mean, is pretty cool.
Right? It's really cool. Like I mean, she's like, she's a big deal. She's won.
She's legit.
She's won like a dozen Emmys. She's got like a few Edward R. Murrow awards.
Well, it is cool. I mean, she's got legit bona fides. And so like for someone like that to just, talk about the blog and the podcast is, kind of exciting. Right?
Yeah. So if she's out there listening, big thanks to you. That was pretty awesome. I'll definitely be sure, to link that article in the show notes. So I don't know if you know out there, but Congress was on break, and usually when they do that, they go back to, their constituencies, and they have like these town hall deals.
Yeah. And this has actually been like national news because these town halls, they're normally very lightly attended, and
right.
They've been pretty raucous recently.
Well, yeah, let's check this out. The constituents of Wisconsin 5 went to their rep, Jim Sensenberger's town hall, and they gave him a hell of a time about him voting to let their ISPs pretty much, gather and sell their their privacy information. And so check this. He defended the vote, saying, and I quote, "Nobody's got to use the internet."
Yeah, I did see that one, and that was what would be the right word? Dumbfounding. Like I was like completely out of sorts when I read that.
Okay. Just the idea that, the internet is like non-essential aside, nobody's got to use the internet. Is this like Larry the Cable Guy who got like elected to represent Wisconsin 5?
Short answer, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, Congressman the Cable Guy went on to say, this also in quotes, the thing is that if you start regulating the internet like a utility, if we did that right at the beginning, we would have no internet.
What?
Yeah. He basically said that if we regulated internet like a utility when it started, we wouldn't have no internet. I think is what he said. We would have no internet.
So by that logic, regulating, let's say, I don't know, electrical power, right? We should all not have electricity right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that aside, I mean, it did start as a utility, first off. And not only that, but it was started as like a government project.
Well, and on top of that, like what they effectively did, and we went over this pretty thoroughly in some of the other podcasts, so if you're really interested, check that out. But they've granted, true monopolist power to organizations that have been functioning as, more or less monopolists, right?
Right.
Like, so they just formalized the relationship, right? Like they said we're not going to put any sort of protections against your abuses of people's information. So I don't understand the rationale that leads people to say things like we can't regulate things when we clearly do all over our society. We have speed limits, right? Like there's plenty of reasons to have regulation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's like they think it's like some magic bullet where if you deregulate something, automatically competition will happen. And
Right.
if that's not the case, it's just especially in this industry.
No, and that's exactly right, Dennis. Economists have a term for it. It's just basically, um, externalities, right? Like, it all it really means is when um, you know, there's positive and negative externalities, and basically all it really means in this case is it's a negative externality where in the market, because there is so much in the way of capital outlays that need to be made up front, there's no way to really get competition in the marketplaces at the local level without uh, solving it through regulation, right? Like you have to
Oh, at this point, yeah.
fix the externality, right?
Yeah,
Like,
well, I mean, it started the internet started as a government project.
right.
It then went on as kind of like a regulated entity from that. I mean, under
For a
you
long
know, it was
time.
long time. A lot of those deregulatory moves they made kind of basically gave a boon to the proto ISPs
Yep.
when it came to they pretty much just gave them miles and miles of tubes to basically set up internet infrastructure and tons of subsidies to do this to like continue and to build, and they still give subsidies on that. So you had all these people who have like this wealth of infrastructure
Yeah, no
that was pretty
pun.
much handed to them.
Yeah, no pun intended, right? Like, because that's
Right.
exactly what it's given is wealth, and it's on it's on the consumer's dime and the taxpayer's dime, and so to add insult to injury, right? When consumer protection groups and consumers themselves say, "Hey, all we really want out of this, we're living with the fact that you're going to rake us over the coals." Um, from a pricing standpoint, can you at least not sell all of our data? And nope, that can't stand.
Right. And so
That's
so
what's been decided.
yeah, so Sensenbrenner is, I mean, he just the whole fact that like the internet is like something like you can't get a job.
No,
Really, I mean, in a lot of industries, like sure, you can go, work at fast food, and you and I mean, retail will allow you walk in, hand in resume the old way. But I mean, if you're gonna go get a job in any type of office setting or any type of like IT job, really, you're
yeah.
gonna have to send in an electronic resume, and
Well,
you're gonna need to do that over the internet.
that's a great point. I mean, like just start with when was the last time sans fast food restaurants you saw a help wanted sign?
It's rare. It's maybe mom and pop shops. I mean,
Occasionally, right? But
right.
it's pretty unusual, and you're certainly not seeing that for, quote unquote good jobs, like good paying jobs.
Right. And when we say,
Like,
I mean, yeah, those jobs are pretty much it's going to be, you're not going to be making six figures
yeah,
off a help wanted sign in most cases.
everybody's got to do what they got to do. Like, I've certainly worked my fair share of jobs that I was like, well, I guess I got to grind this out, but
Right.
that's not the job that people are really striving for. And so having a resume you can submit electronically is really, a prerequisite for doing anything these days.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically like saying, you don't have to, I don't know, have access to pens and pencils and paper before the internet. like to get a job.
Yeah, it's really a pretty silly thing, right? Like, and it also puts you at a huge disadvantage, right? Like there've been a lot of studies done about the what they call the underbanked, which is basically, people that don't have checking accounts and so on. And so much of banking and, just bill paying has been moved online. And many of those things, you get tremendous benefits. I mean, other than the fact that it's just all automated, right?
Oh,
Which is
right, right.
nice. But you're also saving on postage, which is something, right? And hassle. But sometimes companies pay for a small benefit for people putting everything electronically. I mean, it saves them a tremendous amount of manpower, right? Because that data, if it's not written on a piece of paper, is very easy to be input into a system, right? Like it's just a simple lookup into a database, and that's that. So, yeah, it's just stupid what the guy's
Yeah.
saying.
Uh, he's got to be either that or the dude's like 105.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a partisan vote, right? Like for partisan purposes, and I get that, right? I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good thing, but I understand that's how the world works. And then he's just grasping at straws while people are yelling at him. And well, I might do the same thing. I would just hope I would vote differently, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the disappointing thing.
All right. Yeah. So staying on the ridiculous Congress action, 50 Republican senators that signed away everybody's privacy wrote this letter to Chairman Pai. Here, let me bring it up real quick and I'll read it. So it says, Dear Chairman Pai, we write to ensure that the Federal Communications Commission stands ready to protect consumer privacy. Protecting consumer privacy while allowing for innovation has been critical to American innovation. Maintaining an environment that permits innovation without sacrificing consumer privacy is critical to our nation's future prosperity and creation of new customer services. The Federal Trade Commission has long been the standard bearer for striking the right balance of consumer protection within the pro-innovative construct that encourages consumer choice, opportunities, and new jobs. The FTC's mission is to protect the consumers from unfair competition and unfair or deceptive acts or practices in commerce. This consumer-focused mission has a decades-long history of protecting consumers and ensuring companies live up to their privacy promises, etc., etc. So here, let me get to the juicy part. In 2015, when the FCC reclassified broadband under Title II of the Communications Act, it created the current privacy concerns. Prior to that reclassification, Americans' online privacy was protected by the FTC. In reclassifying broadband, the FCC created a blind spot where the FTC's common carrier exception left ISPs without privacy regulators. The FTC's time-tested approach to privacy had protected Americans since the dawn of the internet. Not true. An FCC approach that mirrors the FTC will continue to protect consumers in this tumultuous time. Until such time as the FCC rectifies the Title II classification that inappropriately removed ISPs from the FTC's jurisdiction, we urge the FCC to continue to hold ISPs to their privacy promises. The authority vested to the FCC under Section 201 and 202 of the Communications Act of 1934 charged the FCC with protecting consumers against unjust and unreasonable practices. We believe this language provides the necessary authority to protect consumers in a similar manner to how the FTC protects the consumers until its authority to prevent unfair and deceptive acts and practices. And then they go on to say, we hope that, you'll move quickly to protect these privacies. Now, let me unpack all that because it's a lot there.
Yeah, that was a lot of words.
It was. And I hold it. I'm glad you guys hung in there. I hope everyone's still awake. But I wanted to read it in its entirety, just, for the due diligence of it, because I don't want to sit here and just, give my interpretation without reading the actual source.
Well, in before you do, if anyone was playing the new drinking game of how many times Congress can mention innovation in a letter,
Seriously.
They're all loaded at this point. So
All right.
continue.
Okay, so basically, the letter, and it's signed by the 50 senators that voted to, give ISPs your information to sell for advertising. But basically, they say that the FCC declared ISPs Title II to enact net neutrality. That's okay. That's true. And to quick recap, net neutrality is your ISP can't block or throttle traffic they don't like, and that they can't give special treatment to content that they do like. That's really, in a nutshell, what net neutrality is. The senators, they say in the letter that this is a problem because the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, can't regulate privacy because they don't have the jurisdiction to regulate Title II entities. That's true. But the FCC the FCC went, this isn't in the letter, they did not mention this. The FCC moved on net neutrality, and then they developed privacy regulations that were slated to go into effect this year. The senators who are complaining that there's no privacy oversight just remove the law that the FCC
that would have put that in place.
Exactly. So basically, the senators are complaining because the FCC made an action that removed privacy, but then had a contingency plan to fix it and actually have it rolled out this year. And yeah, sure, there might have been a gap, but a company's not going to put billions of dollars in investment on something they know that's only going to work for 6 or 7 months. You know what I mean? They're not going to sit. They're not going to sit there and build up all this infrastructure to profit off of this information if they know the FCC has rules that are going to affect in 2017 to stop it. So it wasn't an issue until they voted to remove the privacy protections 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I read the whole thing as, hey, we didn't realize what we were signing up for, or if we did, we didn't realize everyone was going to notice and be really, really angry. So we're going to have you guys as, someone we can blame for it, because we're going to say, hey, you have the authority to solve this.
Yeah, well, that's the funny part is they write a letter about how they just voted to take this power away from the FCC. And then they ask Pi to protect privacy through the FCC.
Yeah.
Please. Until the FCC can overturn net neutrality, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Crazy. It is crazy. When I read that, I was just like, the gall. I guess they just think we're all idiots.
Well, I suspect, there's certainly a lot of that thinking going on.
Well, it couldn't be malevolent, too. It could just be incompetence.
I think a lot of it is incompetence, which that's like the new game these days. Like, is it malevolence or incompetence?
That's got to be, that sounds like a good, that's like something you would play after Pictionary gets old.
Yeah.
Like a party game, like malevolence or incompetence.
Yeah, actually, they were talking about it. I think it was on Pod Save America, where they were like, that's like the new game these days.
Oh, it's crazy.
This is one of those things that it seems more like incompetence to me. Like they didn't realize it until after the fact, because I honestly think most of these senators don't read what's put in front of them, and they just go vote on party lines.
Yeah. And then you have the White House making that move last week to basically, because it used to be transparent on who went in and out of the White House.
Oh,
and the White House just stopped that to where you don't know who goes in and out anymore for meetings. So a week after Trump signs away everyone's privacy from their ISPs, he goes and does this. It's like he wants their privacy on who's walking in and out of the White House.
Yeah.
But, American citizens, you can let them,
Well, the rest of us don't have executive privilege, right? What do regular citizens matter?
Right. So, all the transparency stuff seems to be rolled back for the White House, while citizens' data is just a free for all for profit for ISPs. It seems.
Yeah. These things are just making me jaded, man. I sound really, really, really jaded. Yeah, that's the only word I got. I didn't used to be this way, I swear.
Yeah. So I mean, and also in like the letter, they kind of show their hand because it looks like they want Title II to go away and just hand over privacy protection to the FTC. And I mean, Pi agrees with that because in the Washington Post, Washington Post op-ed, Pi and the acting chairman Olhausen,
Yep,
they
I remember
described
this.
they describe the FTC as, quote, America's most experienced privacy cop, and that they need to be put, quote unquote, back on the beat.
Yeah, that's a really, really weird phrasing, even. Like,
Well, I mean,
of
it's
the
just
problem.
like they're. I mean, it sounds like they're toting them, like they're pumping them up to be like the privacy experts. But what's hysterical is like last year, the FTC had, I mean, and this is actually in a document that was filed on the FTC, because I think it was a comment that they put in when they were discussing the privacy rules last year. They said that their privacy enforcement ability is limited, and from those official documents, it says, quote, the FTC has repeatedly called for Congress to pass additional laws to strengthen the privacy and security protections. Basically, they don't have the power that they need to enforce privacy. So that's what the FTC said after, like, meanwhile, Pi and Elhausen are saying that they're the best privacy cop we got.
Right.
And FTC is saying, "Oh, we can't really enforce privacy like we should."
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and maybe that's a sad statement right there, is that they're the best privacy cop we've got. It's just
But yeah,
they're horribly inadequate, right?
right. But and actually in that same document, the FTC was saying how they want the things that the FCC were putting in place to curtail ISPs from getting like your web browsing information and stuff. They thought they wanted that power for third party for third party information gathering. For instance, like if you go to a website and like they're running, like, and Facebook is gathering information
Special
out of
cookies and all of that.
Exactly. You can go to the terms of service, and they've said that, but the FTC would like the power to actually make people opt into that instead of having to go and see and opt out.
Yeah.
So the FTC is actually stated in documents saying that they like the FCC's framework and agree with the FCC's framework.
I don't even know what to say about some of this stuff, man.
Yeah.
It's a downer, right? Like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, everyone is now thoroughly depressed, right? And
Well,
turning
the hits will keep coming.
Oh,
because we haven't even gotten to the net neutrality plan that Pi kind of went over with telecom trade groups like a couple weeks back.
Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Joel and I were on vacation last week, so it's kind of like we're covering stuff that happened over 2 weeks right here.
Yeah, we're catching up, and so I appreciate everyone bearing with us on this. But
so at this meeting, which occurred like the first week, I mean, it was like the 7th or 4th or the 7th, I can't remember, but it was like the first week of April. He probably met with telecom trade groups, and he kind of went over net neutrality. Now, the sources from the meetings reported that his new plan kind of really comes down to two things. He's going to persuade carriers to voluntarily put language about net neutrality in their terms of service. And then they're going, if their terms of service are violated by a carrier, the FTC can then go after that carrier for violating the terms of service under their, deceptive practices.
Yeah, not to state the obvious, but what possible incentive would any carrier have for putting that in place?
I know. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, it comes down to like, okay, there's like a whole myriad of issues. I mean, first and foremost, which we've talked about before, in order for Pi to even get FTC to have the power, he's got to roll back the Title II designation. And then he's somehow got to get the Ninth Circuit Court's decision reversed that implies the FTC has no jurisdiction whatsoever over a company that offers any Title II service.
Yeah.
So basically, any ISP that has a phone service, which is most of them, and Comcast is coming out with one this year.
They just announced it. Yeah.
So yeah, like if the courts he's got to, roll back all Wheeler's designation, which is going to be open to comments, and it's going to be a whole, that's got to be a whole process.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how he's going to, get that court decision reversed, because he's going to need an act of Congress to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line, is he can't, right? Like, the only ones who can do that are Congress. And, like you said, putting any of this through the rulemaking process to handle the Title II designation is going to take months to years. Right, like it's a very long process.
Yeah, and this isn't just like my interpretation of the law, because like McSweeney, who is like the commissioner of the FTC, she was Ars Technica interviewed her a couple of days ago, and she said, and I think I might be wrong, I'm pretty sure she has a law background. She said that she mentioned specifically the Ninth Circuit Court decision, saying that their hands are pretty much tied when it comes to regulating any company that has a Title II service.
Yeah.
So this isn't just me kind of like guessing at what's going to happen. Like, this is like the FTC thinks this.
Well, and again, we talked about it previously. What was it? The Ninth Circuit came out on this?
The Ninth Circuit did this.
Yeah.
I think they're out of San Francisco, California.
Yeah,
I know it's in California.
I think that's right. With what they said, we're not interpreting how that has to be solved. Like, that's laid out in the Constitution, right? Like,
that part.
That part is not even like that's
right. No, right. I'm just talking about the part where
I know
the actual decision itself. But you're totally right. I mean, that's like basic. I learned that in high school.
Grade civics, right?
Right.
So some of this stuff isn't, or in fact, both of these elements are not speculation. Like, this is how it will have to be resolved in order for his, in my opinion, harebrained scheme to, if you take the chairman's suggestion on face value, right, that he genuinely believes this is what he should do, then you have to say, well, it's just foolhardy, right? Like, it's not a good way of solving the problem, right? I just don't see how he can actually get it done. So,
he can. Here's what can happen. He can roll this back, and then the FTC has no power whatsoever, and regulating ISPs is just in some kind of limbo to where they're completely deregulated.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is like, to me, that's the logical conclusion of this, right? Like, I think the plan he posed is largely nonsense, right? Like, because he knows the process well enough. I mean, the man's an attorney, right? And he's an
attorney, but he doesn't seem to be like too into details.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing for an attorney. Like, my wife's an attorney, and they tend to be pretty detail oriented. I'm just letting you know.
You would have to be. That's why I did like a half a semester pre-law, and I was like, no, not for me.
Yeah, maybe I'll move on, right? Like, right. Yeah, it's the same way.
But yeah, so okay, this glaring issue aside, with like, the entire premise of what he wants to do not being tenable, you mentioned they need to voluntarily put this in. Yeah. Now, even if they want to be nice and play ball and they put it in, the FTC has no rulemaking ability. Mm-mm. So it's not like these companies can't just pull it out or update their terms of service later. And who's going to make them put it back in? Because no one's going to have the authority to do so.
Well, and the other thing, I mean, like we've said this term a lot, but they are effectively an oligopoly. Like they function, they're monopolists locally, they're oligopolists nationally, right?
Right.
And they'll move as a block. Like there is no competitive advantage to anyone being the first one to do this, right? So I cannot see a world where one of the big providers goes, "Oh yeah, just to get into the good graces of the toothless FTC, now toothless FTC, we will, we'll do this." Like, it's just not going to happen.
No, it's not. Yeah, so you have the fundamental flaw with the Ninth Circuit. You got the fact that they have to do this voluntarily. You got the fact that there's no enforcement, even if they do it voluntarily later on. It's going to stop them from updating their terms of service to like take out this thing. And then like, you know, there's a handful of companies that control like 90% of the market. So you could go to those companies and do this, but there's a ton of smaller ISPs out there that control the rest. So are you going to go to every single internet service provider and ask and like kind of like beg them to put this in?
I mean, short answer is no, that's not going to happen, right?
What are they going to do to manage all that? Like, how are you going to manage like who's put in their terms of service and who hasn't?
Yeah, how would you even let's go to a hypothetical world where fine, this all got put in place. All of the providers, I believe there are 1,500 nationally, right? Because, like you were saying, there's lots of these small players that service basically very tiny localities.
Yeah, there's some out there that service like one building or one block.
Yeah.
And they really just kind of like, they run backhaul to the internet for that building.
Yeah. But let's wave a magic wand and all of them comply. What are you going to do? Monitor the terms and services for like 1,500 companies from that point on, or are you just going to pick the top ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it makes any difference because you really can't do anything about it anyway.
About it, right? Yeah.
Once they're out of the FCC's jurisdiction, the FTC doesn't have any power to dictate terms of service to these companies.
Oh,
so
yeah. So I don't know. I don't see how any of this is tenable.
Yeah, and here's my favorite kicker, which is like something that we haven't talked about and not many people are talking about, but I mean, we've discussed like the penalty mechanism of the FTC. Like any civil penalty or customer redress or anything has to go through the judiciary.
Right.
It's not like the FTC can like levy fines. They can't. They have to go through the judiciary for anything. Now, most ISPs have something called a mandatory arbitration clause in their agreements. If you read the fine print, which I know no one does. But really what this is you're basically, if you sign up for an ISP in 90 some percent of ISPs out there, you've waived your right. Well, either party can call a dispute to arbitration. So if you want to sue them or maybe have a class action suit against them, they can say, no, we're going to go through arbitration, and you have to because you already agreed to it.
Right.
So it's basically a circle of protection against court cases for the ISP. I don't know how the FTC is going to be able to have any power whatsoever when it comes to redressing any grievances.
Yeah, I don't know. And that, from the ISP's perspective, right? Like, that's just wonderful, right? Like they are looking at this as a golden ticket, right? Like, because our information collectively is extremely valuable. So they now have access to all of that. And they, they already had it, right? Like that's the other thing is they had it. They just couldn't do anything with it now. Now they can.
Right.
And so they can go sell it. And basically, if they're found to be doing something with it that is particularly egregious, there's almost nothing that can be done, right? Like, and that's just crazy that we would put ourselves as a country in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, and they're just the obsession with just getting stuff to the FTC. It's really, and they know the FTC for all the talk of how that we need them to be what is a cop back on the beat or whatever. They
Yeah.
really deep down know that they want privacy and net neutrality regulated by the FTC because the FTC is a weak regulator,
Yeah.
and the FTC will admit this. They don't have the power to regulate company. All they really have the power to do is unfair practices, deceptive practices. That's really all they're really spelled out to do for the most part.
Which again, when we go back to like, oh, the master plan of having everyone sign up, so that I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but it is kind of comical. Like the idea that they would all sign up so they would expose themselves to the one enforcement tool that the FTC has. You know, it's just ridiculous.
It is, and like okay, so I mentioned that interview with Terrell McSweeney
Yep.
from the FTC, and they asked her a bunch of questions on like net neutrality, and this is what she said. She said, "I think it's important to have the expert regulator that understands the industry, technology, networks, etc. They should be making the decisions using their authority." And then she went on to say that the FCC has more authority to act in that regard. And she said, quote, "We are a very hardworking agency, but we are not a very big agency. The FTC doesn't have a lot of expertise in network engineering. We're not the FCC in that regard. The FTC receives millions of consumer complaints each year across all industries under its jurisdiction, and we can't possibly act on every single complaint."
Oh,
So I mean, there it is right there. And
yeah.
like that's from the horse's mouth. That's the person who runs the FTC, who basically says all this stuff they're saying, it's not really possible.
Right. And even if it were possible, even if they had the authority, they don't have the manpower,
Oh,
right?
right. Right,
Like,
right. Which and they don't have either. They don't have the authority to do what they need to do to enforce privacy regulations the way they need to be enforced. And like you said, they don't have the manpower even if they did have that
well,
authority.
and as it was just pointed out in that quote, they don't have the expertise. And we talked about that in something else, right? Like that when we were speculating a while back about this getting shifted over, that it takes years to build up that kind of bench, right? Like, you're just talking about an entirely different set of skills, right? And it takes a long time to build up those regulatory chops. So even if they all of a sudden, they got extra budget so they could go staff up, it would take a long time to get there.
Right. I mean, and but this is the plan. The plan is to try to get it under this agency that's small and just doesn't have the power to act. And like one of the big canards that they keep pulling out is like it's duplicative. Like a lot of the FCC and FTC regulations are they're duplicative. And like McSweeney said, she said that it's kind of like she didn't say it was ridiculous, but she said we don't draft car safety guidelines.
Right.
She says the NHTSA does, and then the FTC partners with them to help them understand privacy and security concerns connected to vehicles. And then the NHTSA has the authority to act under the FTC's guidance. You know, and then they said, the FTC doesn't draft medical device guidelines or rules for energy networks. That's all handled by other agencies like, FERC and FDA.
Yeah. Which
And
is pretty common, right? Like
yeah,
you've
and
got a
that's kind of what
special
she did
this.
here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
because they have an MOU with the FCC on how privacy and or like
Well,
any. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
memorandum of understanding
Yes,
for
yes.
those
Sorry
that
about that.
don't. No,
I
that's
I acronymed.
you did, and we are not acronym friendly. If we can, although we're saying FTC and FCC all over the place. So
Yeah, I hope. I mean, Federal Trade
at this
Commission.
point,
Yeah, I'm sure. If you listen to the show, newbies might be like, "What in the hell are they talking about?" But I mean, if I'm sure anyone who's
yeah,
listened to an
exactly.
episode or two knows
But
those two
but
acronyms well.
MOU is kind of inside the beltway, so
It
that one I
is.
think we spell out.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and so they already had an agreement. They've had a couple MOUs on, basically one agency guiding the other on how to handle X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, and all that really just again, just so people know what an MOU really does, is it's basically a handshake agreement between it borders on being a contract, right? Like
It is because it is a written document and
it
it's
is
filed into the Federal
better than
Register.
it is better than a. I don't know how binding they are,
Well,
right?
it's binding that your head will roll
Yeah,
when you're
you
called on
get
the
in
carpet.
trouble for it.
Right. It's as binding as like um the Civil War in England that like created Parliament. It's as binding as that. The Queen doesn't want another civil war to happen, so she doesn't take any of the power that she could.
Well, you're reaching deep for that one.
Well, no, I mean that's
No,
kind of what it
I
is.
know,
It's like,
I know. I'm kidding.
but I mean that's how lots of governments operate. It's like
Sure.
this really bad thing happened last time we did that, so even though I have the power to do that in print, I will never ever do that because
Yeah,
heads will roll.
and that's it. So an MOU basically is two agencies saying, "Hey, we're going to work together on this, and you're going to have this part of the role, and I'm going to have this part." And what the FTC typically does is they provide specialized expertise in their area, and as Dennis was saying, and the reason for that, I'm assuming based on the quote we heard earlier, is they are specialists, they know their niche, and they don't have a ton of manpower.
Right.
Whereas
I mean,
they don't have a lot of enforcement power.
yeah. It's I mean, there's this McSweeney just pretty much. I love that name. I don't know why. It's just fun to say.
No, it's a great name.
She just really just like kind of unloaded in this interview. There's you know tons of great quotes. I'll put the article in there. And I mean, one good point that she made was that moving from a clear, you know, she used the legal term ex ante, rule. So basically, a clear.
Rule-based system.
Yeah, but ante is like rule before, a
Ah,
clear upfront rule
gotcha.
around the open internet and requirements that maintain an open internet, and moving to this ex post or a post enforcement mechanism, which is what the FTC is. And basically what she's saying is, the way the FCC had it lined out, it was like, don't you guys dare do this or we'll get you. So basically they wouldn't, the FTC has to operate under the once they screw up, then we can
Yeah.
act. Where she said that going to that type of post enforcement is a strong tilt in the favor of incumbents in the market.
Yeah, it is. And, in addition, like, what's funny, right? Like, to me, is that from a planning standpoint, right? Like if you're doing your accounting, right? Like you're in the ISPs and you're trying to figure out like how you are going to lay out your planning for the next however many years, right? Is inconvenient as regulations might be because you want to do whatever you can to maximize profits, you know, the fact that they're laid out beforehand, right? Like, and don't you dare do this, is actually convenient from a planning standpoint. It tells you exactly what you can and can't do,
Right.
right?
Because
Like,
this is a case by case basis. It's however they spell it out in their terms of service.
yep,
That's going to be the litmus test for if they, broke their promise or not.
well, and then it's going to come down to if the FTC thinks they can clearly win in court, or well, first get to court, right? As we were saying earlier, a lot of this stuff is handled through arbitration. But if they think they can get to court, and they think they have the case to win, they'll bring it forward, right? Like, so it's very unpredictable. The only way this actually works out in the um, ISP's favor is if all the proverbial tumblers are lined up just as they are now, where it's
Right.
like you take it, you move it out of the easy to plan, though, regulated model, into this nebulous model, but you put the most toothless regulator on that side possible,
Right.
right? Which is what they did, right? Where they're like, hey, even if they try and bring it forward, they're going to be able to win so infrequently. It's as though there's no rules at all.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And with this whole like enforcement after the fact, it's based really on ISP promises.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy.
I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, that's exactly what he's asking for. And so their enforcement, there's issues with detecting, like how are customers going to know what's happening,
Right.
and how are they going to know when to complain? Because that's kind of what has to happen for the FTC to act.
Yeah, because the FTC has to bring forward like, hey, they violated their terms. And in order
But a
to do
customer
that,
has to say it
exactly.
first. Right, right. So like it kind of puts the onus on the consumer to figure out if they're being violated. They're not network engineers.
No, and honestly, it's just I forget what the term is, but it's basically when like a market breaks down because there's a tremendous information advantage on one side, right?
Yeah, and
Like
that's
it,
what's happening. Yeah.
yeah. And so you get this situation where one side can charge much higher rates.
Insurance, guys, think insurance because that's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Like the insurance, the healthcare industry is the way it is because consumers don't have the information they need to make decisions about what they're buying,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
it's
mean,
just that's what this will turn into.
yeah, and it's yeah, I have got nothing good to say about it, right? Like
There
it's
is really nothing good to say about it.
no,
It's
it's
a
really
disaster.
makes me sad, right? Like it's not good. Um
Uh,
that being said, hey, we did get mentioned in an article. That was nice. Can we go back to
yeah,
that part and just talk about how the blog got mentioned? That was
yeah. I mean, it is really freaking depressing, and you know it's bad if I'm like fake saying the F word.
yeah, yeah, because so Dennis and I have effectively made like a little pact where we're gonna try and avoid cursing as much as we can on this podcast because I sound like a drunken sailor like in normal circumstances.
Oh well, that's what we need to do. We need to start like a Patreon where you get the unedited version of the show.
You wait until I finish like 4 years, and then I'm like, let me tell you what I really think about these people.
F that guy.
Mhm.
Oh man, it's we're in a pretty bad situation when it
Hey,
comes to the future of the internet. I mean, we might get lucky. I mean, their incompetence may run so deep that they kind of like they telegraph their moves so much like they're Bond villains, and we're able to get out of this mess even though it looks dire.
yeah, I mean, I suspect that like some of our, nastiest, predictions that are going on, and at least in my head right now, are probably not gonna happen, right? Like, in partly that is because the ISPs know they have kind of a sweet spot where they can be, you know, a little malevolent, but
Well,
not.
it's not the malevolence so much as that they can sit back quietly in a mass market share.
Yeah, and just build a war chest from marketing our information. I mean, like that's just straight profit, man.
Oh yeah,
Like I said, the data's already there. All they got
yeah.
to do is sell it.
And as for like what we think's going to happen, I mean, I'm not really. I mean, when it comes to politics, I'm not very good in the prediction business. But when it comes to like seeing a direction of policy, because I mean, I've worked in areas where you have to deal with a lot of this kind of junk, with
Yeah,
policy and rules and movements and stuff. And if you go back to episode 21, where we talk about Jeff Eisenach and what his plan is for net neutrality,
yeah,
and he was like he was part of the transition team, Trump's transition team. It's exactly this. What we're
yeah.
saying right now, what's happening right now. If you go back and listen to episode 21, it's exactly what we said was going to happen.
Well, this is going to sound terrible. I feel pretty good about our prediction. bona fides so far, right?
When it comes to this, yeah. When it comes to
Yeah,
net
when it comes to
neutrality,
this,
yes. Yes.
I feel sad about it, right? Like,
Oh,
because I
yeah.
didn't want to
Well,
be right.
episode 21 was so enough people kind of got out in front of this so it wouldn't happen, but that didn't work.
Yeah, it's the other thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that you know it's a dynamic system, right? Like, so there is always the potential. It's like the great American hope, right? That innovation, that word that was mentioned 65 times in that congressional letter there.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like innovation. If you take away regulation, innovation will happen. Regulation is crushing investment. Very untrue if you look at the data.
Well,
But I mean,
and
they say it all the time.
I don't believe that innovation is being stifled right now under the regulatory, process that's in place.
Oh,
But I
no.
but I do believe that innovation often breaks open a market in a way that is very, very hard to anticipate, beforehand, right? Like,
That's true.
so it's one of those things, like the short-term future for this and all of our information, especially if you're someone who really, really cares about your information, like it doesn't, or cares about your privacy, it doesn't look good in the short run, right? But in the longer run, I don't know. I hold out a little hope.
Well, see, when it comes down to that whole innovation argument, sure, in an industry, regulation can stifle innovation. But you know what else can stifle innovation? A company
Yeah.
that is so large and so rich and has such a big, wallet that they can put an environment in place that snuffs out any threats.
So
So any any innovation out there that would kind of dethrone said company can just kind of be bought out, lobbied out.
yeah.
So
Y- y-
it's not just regulation that stifles innovation.
No.
It's large, huge, old companies
You don't
that
even have
own
to
a
go
market.
you don't even have to go very far from this discussion to prove that out. Just go back to Ma Bell. Ma
Oh, yeah.
Bell and Bell Labs, they invented all sorts of crazy stuff that was awesome. Like, I don't know, the fax machine, right?
Back
And,
then was awesome.
and it sat on a shelf for
Yep.
a long time because Bell didn't want to hook it to its network, right? It just didn't know what to do with it and said, park it, right? Like, and there were lots of other things like that. Like, I think I've said this before, but the old joke was you can have any color phone you want as long as it's black, right?
Right.
Like, because everybody had the exact same phone for decades, because that's what Bell felt like making. It was probably because black plastic was cheap, right? Like, and that was probably the rationale. But because that's, I don't know if you know this, but that's one of the reasons why Legos were originally red, was that red plastic was the cheaper plastic to get.
Oh, I did
And
not know that.
yeah, I went
Yeah.
to a Lego fest
Oh, there you go.
with my 7-year-old because I am super cool. Um,
Oh.
that was sarcasm. I'm not cool. But anyway, so you don't have to go, like, the companies that half of the companies we're talking about now came from were actually known for stifling innovation with their given practices,
Right.
right?
And if it's like we are hitting a little, if you want to go back, it's like we've all been through this before. Like every little piece of it. Like if you go back to, and I think you've mentioned the Tennessee Valley deal before
Yeah, yeah.
on the show. Like when electricity was kind of new. We started off with, Sensenbrenner at the top saying, nobody's got to use internet.
Nobody's got to use a. What's wrong with your kerosene lamp?
Right,
Well,
exactly, and that's not a joke. Like people
no,
might think
but
those
it's
those
kind of a joke, but
But
only
it's
in the
really not
sense
though.
that it makes
They
it
would
sound
no. They were
stupid, right?
then it wasn't a joke. Then they were saying things like you don't need electricity. You had the lawmaker saying it's a luxury. until, enough people started screaming and yelling saying, no, it's not. And they started putting, municipal, they turned it into a utility. They essentially made it a utility because it
No, it's
wasn't.
exactly what they did.
It started out as private companies delivering it and them treating it as a luxury until they realized the disservice they're doing to the public, because you're picking winners amongst the citizenry, where here you can have electricity but you can't. And then they made it a utility and kind of like over time fixed all those issues. That's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
And the same, because what you'll hear about, like when someone brings up municipal internet, which is kind of what they're trying to what they did with Tennessee Valley, except this was with internet. They call you, like, they'll use words like communist. Do you know what they used to call people during that time when they wanted, municipal electricity?
What's that?
Bolsheviks, because communism didn't exist yet, but that's the
Sure.
precursor to communism. And that's what they would call. It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact tired arguments. It's this, and this is just a complete mirror of what happened with electricity.
Yeah, and again, I look at, like I was saying, with the, Ma Bell, and I go, wait a second, like, literally the company that AT&T and Verizon came from did this. Like, they actively stifled innovation because they had so much market share when they were Ma Bell that eventually the federal government had to come in and bust them up. Now, for a variety of reasons, but that was one of them, right? There was not enough competition. So they went and broke them up. And, that's why I say eventually this will sort itself out. It's just a grim time for a while, right? And now the way, and maybe this will give people a little bit of solace, or at least I'm going to try and talk myself into feeling a little better, is that maybe the way we can kind of fast track that is if we make a stink. Right.
Oh yeah, a big stink, and that's you're totally right. That's what needs to happen. Is people need to really get up in arms about this and start voting out all those people who are supporting this type of, you know, treating the internet like it's a luxury.
Well, at least if so, I would take someone who made a principled argument, even if I didn't agree with it, right? Um, but they made an argument that was more than a single sentence about, like, oh, well, it's just a luxury. Oh, it's just the internet. Okay, let's take away your internet. Let's price the internet service to where it's, for the average citizen, as these prices creep up, it's going to eat up, 5-10% of their disposable income, right? And that's going to start to really bite. Let's price that congressman's internet to where their $150,000 salary, 5-10% of it gets eaten up by their internet service, and see
Exactly.
how, freewheeling they are with signing these bills. And I mean, obviously that can't happen, right? Like, that's not going to happen. But if somebody made an argument, right? This is all I expect from my senators and my representatives, is make a principled argument that is more than a soundbite.
Yeah,
And,
or more than like something that some telecom trade paper wrote.
yeah, I'll buy that. Fine. We'll put 2 criteria on it, right?
Because that's really all it is. I mean,
Yeah.
because I had somebody, a listener forwarded me an email because he listened to our privacy episode and he wrote his senator, and he sent me, and I was going to read it on the air today, but really everything they've said is really just a repeat of everything we just said on
Just now, right? Yeah.
just now. I mean, it is. It's and we've broken it down before. Because we've talked about like why the FTC, isn't suited to do this. And really, that's all the response from the senator staff was, the net neutrality rules choke innovation and they make it hard for ISPs to make investments, and we've debunked that time and time again. And they all tote the same line because it's in this. They're all reading the same telecom trade papers that are telling them to say this stuff.
Right. And I mean, like, refer back to, I guess it was 2 episodes ago, where we talked about, yeah, it was 2 episodes ago, I'm pretty sure, where we talked about the money, right? Like, where the money went in this vote,
Mm-hmm.
where the telecom and, pay TV industry put its money, and then how everyone voted. And then, right? Like, as soon as you do that, you go, oh, I get it. Never mind. I know exactly why this is
Yep.
going the way it went. Right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out.
I mean, and so this is the reason why Joel and I will sit down and talk about this for an hour, because I know there are people out there that are saying, oh, it's they're seeing the internet in front of them. They're seeing the internet as like the forum or the social network or whatever. But really, it's much more important than that. I mean, like we spoke earlier, it's like I think the internet accounts for, like, the direct internet accounts, the industries itself. It accounts for maybe like 1/6 of our GDP. That doesn't include all of the indirect benefits, like we talked about, like how people get jobs because you have to send in your resume, or how people get educated taking online classes, or how commerce moves around. Anytime somebody swipes a credit card, you need the internet.
Well, and one that we've talked about before that I think is undervalued, right? Like, because we people have a tendency to focus on the commerce part, and
Right.
and that's like what my background originally was in. So, like, I totally get focusing on that because it's big and it's important. But the one that I think is often overlooked is like the freedom of speech
Yes.
aspects,
Yes.
right? Like our rights to assemble, right? Like, and in this world, in a country of 330 million of us, um, the ability to assemble virtually over the internet is indispensable, right?
It is.
And I know, like, to go so far as to say, like, it's an inalienable right to have internet access is too far. It's a bridge too far right now for people. People can't get behind that. But I don't think we're that far from it.
Right.
Like,
Well, I mean, if you want to go and really, if you want to get a good example of the future that this kind of thing will kill, go back and listen to episode 19 on the blockchain.
yeah,
Because the blockchain, and if you don't know what that is, it's going to take another 25 minutes to explain it. So just go back and listen to episode 19. But the blockchain is probably one of our most promising technologies for public good.
yeah, certainly in the realm of commerce, and in this sense, I mean, like, big commerce, like mortgages, like, etc. It is a gigantic multiplier.
Yeah. And I mean, not only that, but it puts, like, we're talking like with privacy. You can, with the blockchain, you can actually control your own data.
Yeah,
Like, you can, and you're going to have to listen to the episode to kind of get the content, like what I'm talking about. But the blockchain is actually kind of, it's adding another facet to the internet. And if these folks, it's not millennials that are destroying the internet, as that person, 2 episodes back, like,
uh,
foolishly claimed in an article. It's these bureaucrats and these politicians that are destroying the internet.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if,
That's exactly right. The people that will um, change the internet for the worse, which is almost an expression, right? Are not users. It's the it's the suppliers of the utility service and misguided uh, representatives, right? Like, those will be the people. It's the bureaucrats and the monopolists that will mess up the internet.
yeah, really what we've laid out is what Pi plans to do, and what Congress has already done. And I think Congress is realizing what they've done is stupid, and they're writing a letter to Pi asking him to patch it until his plans can come together and they can live in a completely internet unregulated world or what have you. But we can't really do anything until pen meets paper. He hasn't written anything yet.
Yep.
This is all what's being reported. So as soon as you hear, and I mean, if you just Google if you Google FCC, all it is about this right now. You know how we were complaining about a month or two ago saying how no one's covering this but us and maybe a few other papers like Dirt and Ars Technica.
Yep.
Now everybody's covering it.
Yeah.
And so you'll know as soon as anything happens where it's going to matter.
Yeah.
And that's when you need to start. I mean, we've put instructions out on the blog before on how to comment at the FCC, because that's what their process will happen when they go and they start rolling this out. It's going to open up for comment. Everyone just go and flood it with comments. Call your representative so your representative's pressure. Because while there's separation, there's a lot of back channeling that happens in Washington.
Yeah.
So if you can get anybody's ear that represents you, do it. Go if you live near DC, go down to the FCC when they meet once a month. Because you sent me that article today where a bunch of people went and they rickrolled Pi.
I thought that was hilarious.
It was funny. It was a bunch of net neutrality supporters went in and sat in because they met today. They met while, I mean, this is kind of wonky, but I think the only thing that came out of today's meeting was they lifted, there used to be caps on business to business.
Yep.
Internet. They basically got rid of those, which is really bad. It's just too wonky for me to actually get into right now. It's really bad because all our internet prices are going to probably start going up because while there are only a handful of internet service providers, there's really only 3 that handle, this
business to business, right?
This business to business piece of the internet that they've just kind of lifted price caps on. Google it. I don't want to depress anybody anymore.
No, but I mean, what it really comes down to there is that the business to business aspect is bad, but at this point, I feel like it's arguing about the drapes don't match the couch.
Well, here it is.
When the house is on fire, right?
It is actually, it's kind of bigger than that because this is the back hall. So it's it's kind of almost like the oil of the internet. You know how oil relates to gasoline and whatever happens to oil has a multiplier effect on gasoline. That's what this is, because this is a good example would be in order for T-Mobile to have Wi-Fi service, they need a business data service connection between their towers and the back end. So they go through the backhaul. They have to buy it from Verizon or AT&T or Qwest,
right? Because
all 3 of which
pipes,
right? So if they're buying service from AT&T, who also provides cell service, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, of course, and that gets passed along to us.
Exactly. So really, anything that happens with those, because the price is capped to kind of keep the market at a. Since it's really kind of a monopoly, and they keep it at a level because they know if it was uncapped, then all hell would break loose when it comes to them raising prices to snuff people out of competition. All those increases, we're going to pay for them in the end. So it is bad. It's just it would take it would just add another half hour to this that I was just not game for today.
And honestly, I don't think it'll be the last time we get a chance to talk about it.
Right. So while he was doing that, a bunch of net neutrality advocates got up and started singing Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up."
They actually sounded pretty good.
It wasn't bad. But they actually kind of threw Pi's name in there too into the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really funny.
People are to their credit, the commission did laugh. Like they did think it was funny.
Actually, pie that bastard. Because like, while I can't stand what he does, like to the internet and to like the stuff we all care about, he got up and danced.
Yeah,
he's an amicable guy. I mean, he seems like if he didn't have views and power that will ruin something I hold dearly, I would probably love hanging out, having a beer with the guy.
I've said this before, and now after spending an hour and 10 minutes being really upset by everything he's doing, I feel bad saying it, but I got a feeling I would like him too.
Yeah.
Like he seems bright and interesting and all of those wonderful things. I just think he's really, really, really wrong-headed on all of this.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I don't, like I said, this isn't, it's not, I don't think it's malevolence. I think it's his ideology is just run so deep that he will use his intellect to justify his ideology. Yeah. And that's when you get into trouble.
That's exactly right. And you know, it is not uncommon for bright people to paint themselves into a corner ideologically. That is not uncommon at all. So I can't, you know, the guy's not evil.
No,
right? He's just wrong.
Right.
Right. Like, and that's the rub of it. Like, I wish he was just twirling his mustache, right? Like, first of all, I wish he would grow a mustache. So then
it would make it so much easier to like to kind of rip them apart and kind of just because like I don't, and that's the thing too. It's like I don't hold any ill will towards any of these people. I just don't want the internet to get all screwed up.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, you know, I think. Just so really people just, you know, pay attention out there. If you once the news hits, comment at the FCC, stay vigilant out there. And, you know, if you have any questions on what you can do, or you want a list or even instructions on, you know, how to comment at the FCC, feel free to shoot us an email at podcast@groundedreason.com. You can hit us up on Twitter. Handles @GroundedReason. Go to the Facebook page. I'll link all that in the show notes. Subscribe to the podcast, because
that's the big one.
I have to say it every episode. I'm obligated to, because like the reason why we do it every week is because people are listening, and the only way more people start listening is if people subscribe. Then our rankings kind of go up in iTunes. More people see the show. More people listen. Then, you know, Joel and I will just keep doing this forever.
Yep.
Well, so, you know, if you want to leave a comment leave a review on iTunes, that'd be great too. We'd really, really appreciate it. So, I mean, that's all I got this week, really.
Yeah. No, I think we've said too much, and we've said enough.
Yeah. So, I'm Dennis Restaro.
This is Joel Reeves.
And we'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Try to take care, everyone.
Something.
I don't know. How do we take care in this debacle?
This episode's been a real uplifting experience.